My wife cheated while I worked 80-hour weeks to pay her debts, so I filed quietly, took the house and never looked back alone. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for most of my adult life, I believed love meant carrying weight quietly and trusting that the person beside you would do the same when it mattered. I was raised that way. In my family, being dependable wasn't praised, it was expected. You didn't complain. You didn't rest. You just handled things. When my wife's debts first came up, I didn't panic. I remember sitting at our small kitchen table, the overhead light flickering slightly, papers spread out between us. Credit cards. Personal loans. A couple of balances she brushed past too quickly. She rubbed her temples and said, "It just got out of hand." I was overwhelmed. "It's temporary." So I stepped up. I took on extra shifts at my main job and picked up a second one at night. 80-hour weeks became normal. I'd come home smelling like coffee and sweat, my feet aching, my head buzzing. She'd look up from the couch, force a tired smile, and say, "I don't know how you do this. I couldn't survive without you." That sentence kept me going longer than it should have. I told myself stability would fix the stress. Once the debts were gone, we'd breathe again. We'd reconnect. That's what adults did, push through. But the numbers never went down. Every time I thought we were catching up, another bill appeared. Another explanation that didn't quite make sense. Interest, she'd say. Fees. I forgot about that one. And every time, I swallowed the doubt because questioning her felt cruel. My days blurred together. Alarm. Work. Work again. Drive home in the dark. Collapse. Repeat. I stopped seeing friends. Stopped going to the gym. Stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. Meanwhile, she kept reassuring me, always calm, always convincing, "We're almost there." I honestly believed I was building our future brick by brick with my exhaustion. I didn't realize I was also tearing myself down, slowly, quietly, while trusting someone who never once asked me to stop. At first, I tracked everything. I made spreadsheets late at night, squinting at numbers while my coffee went cold. I told myself if I could just see the progress, the exhaustion would feel worth it. But month after month, nothing changed. Sometimes the balances were lower for a week or two, then they'd jump right back up, like a bad joke. Every paycheck disappeared the second it hit our account. I'd get the deposit notification on my phone during a shift, and by the time I checked again, it was already gone. When I asked, gently at first, she'd sigh and say, "Bills. Groceries. Minimums. You know how it is." Her tone always made me feel stupid for even asking. We stopped talking about anything except money. Conversations turned into brief updates, like coworkers passing in a hallway. "I paid this. That's due Friday. Can you pick up another shift?" Intimacy faded without a fight. No big argument. Just quiet distance. I was too tired to notice how lonely I'd become. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her on the phone in the bedroom, voice low, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in a while. When I asked who it was, she'd say, "Just a friend from work," and roll over, already done with the conversation. If I pressed, she'd snap, "Not everything is a problem. I'm stressed too, you know." That's when the guilt kicked in. I'd remind myself she was overwhelmed. That I was lucky she trusted me enough to lean on me. People at work praised me constantly, "You're a machine, I don't know how you do it, your wife's lucky." I smiled and nodded, even though my chest felt tight every time they said her name. But late one night, sitting alone in my car after a double shift, I did the math again. Slowly. Carefully. And for the first time, I realized something didn't add up, not just financially, but emotionally. I stared at the steering wheel, hands shaking, and wondered what else I wasn't seeing. The longer it went on, the smaller I felt. Not in a dramatic way, no sudden breakdowns or shouting matches, just a steady erosion. I started measuring my days in hours slept instead of time lived. 3 hours here. 4 if I was lucky. My body adjusted in ways I didn't ask it to. Headaches became background noise. My stomach always felt tight, like it was bracing for bad news. I stopped asking questions altogether. Every time I did, it turned into an argument that somehow ended with me apologizing. "Why are you interrogating me?" she'd say, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under?" And just like that, concern turned into control, curiosity into accusation. I learned silence was cheaper. Our house didn't feel like a home anymore. It was just a place I passed through between shifts. The air always smelled faintly like her perfume mixed with takeout containers. Lights on in rooms I never used. Doors closed when I was gone. I'd come in, drop my bag, and move quietly, like I was visiting someone else's life. She started reframing everything. If I was tired, it was because I chose to work too much. If I felt distant, it was because I wasn't emotionally available. One night, when I mentioned how disconnected I felt, she laughed softly and said, "You're the one who's never here." That sentence stuck to me in a way I couldn't shake. I remember one moment clearly. I was at work, fixing a mistake someone else had made, when a coworker glanced at my phone lighting up again and said, half joking, "Man, whoever that is keeps you busy." I looked down, another message from my wife, asking if I could pick up an extra shift over the weekend. Something about the timing felt wrong. Not alarming. Just off. Driving home that night, I replayed little things I'd brushed past. Her sudden privacy. The way she angled her phone away. How defensive she got over nothing. My chest tightened, and for a second, I considered asking directly. Instead, I told myself I was paranoid. Overtired. Ungrateful. Denial felt easier than facing the possibility that all this work wasn't holding us together, but hiding something already breaking. The first real crack didn't come from a confession or a confrontation. It came from a number that didn't belong. I was paying bills late one night, the house silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the clicking of my keyboard. I'd started doing this ritual alone because it was easier than asking her questions that always turned into fights. As I scanned the statements, one charge stopped me cold. Not huge, but specific. Repeated. A monthly expense that didn't match any loan, card, or utility. When I asked her about it the next morning, I tried to sound casual. "Hey, what's this charge for?" I showed her my phone. Her expression shifted for half a second, just enough for me to notice, before she sighed loudly. "Seriously?" she said. "You're checking up on me now?" I told her I was just trying to understand the numbers. She shook her head, hurt replacing irritation with practiced ease. "I can't believe you don't trust me. After everything I'm dealing with. After everything you say you're doing for us." The word "us" felt sharp in her mouth. Somehow, I ended up apologizing. Again. I told her I was stressed. That I didn't mean to accuse her. She hugged me briefly, stiff, and said, "We're on the same team. Don't turn this into something ugly." But something had shifted. I started noticing how quickly she shut conversations down. How often she framed my concern as betrayal. How trust, in her version, meant silence, not honesty. I stopped talking to friends altogether. I didn't want them asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't want to say things out loud that might make them real. Isolation felt safer than being told what I already feared. A few days later, a coworker mentioned, almost as an aside, that he'd seen my wife out recently. "At that new bar downtown," he said. "Crowded place." I smiled, nodded, pretended it was nothing. He didn't say anything inappropriate. Didn't imply anything. But the comment lodged itself deep. That night, lying beside her while she scrolled on her phone, I realized something uncomfortable. Trust wasn't mutual anymore. It was a rule I followed and a shield she used. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I didn't go looking for the truth because I wanted to. I went looking because my body wouldn't let me rest anymore. Every instinct I'd ignored for months was suddenly loud. My chest felt tight all the time, like I was bracing for impact that never came, until it did. It happened on a random night after another double shift. I came home earlier than expected, the house dim and quiet. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up with a notification. I wouldn't have touched it if the name hadn't popped up first. A name I didn't recognize. Followed by a message preview that ended with, "I miss you already." My hands went cold. I stood there for a full minute, arguing with myself. This isn't you. Don't be that guy. Respect her privacy. But something in me had finally snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I unlocked the phone. I wish I could say I was surprised. The messages were dated and time-stamped. Nights I worked late. Weekends I picked up extra shifts. Conversations filled with jokes, affection, plans. Photos I'd never seen. Inside jokes that made my stomach turn. And then I saw it, the payments. Transfers. Charges that matched the mystery expenses exactly. Hotels. Dinners. Gifts. The debt wasn't just bad spending. It was funding an affair. I sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, reading until my vision blurred. Every argument replayed itself with new meaning. Every time she told me I was distant. Every time she accused me of mistrust. I felt stupid. Not because I trusted her, but because I betrayed myself. My first instinct was confrontation. I imagined waking her up, throwing the phone onto the bed, demanding answers. I could almost hear my voice shaking, my hands trembling. But then something unexpected happened. The anger cooled. In its place was a calm so sharp it scared me. I realized yelling wouldn't give me back my time, my energy, or my dignity. It would only warn her. So I put the phone back exactly where it was. I washed my face. I lay beside her as she slept, her breathing steady, unaware that everything had changed. She thought I was still carrying the weight. She had no idea I'd just put it down, and started planning. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye like I always did. Same routine. Same words. "Drive safe," she mumbled, already half distracted. If my hands were shaking, she didn't notice. If my chest felt hollow, she didn't ask. That was the moment I understood how invisible I'd become, and how useful that invisibility could be. I didn't confront her. I didn't hint. I didn't change my tone. I went to work and did what I'd always done, except now every move had a purpose. On my lunch break, sitting alone in my car, I made my first quiet phone call, to a divorce lawyer recommended by someone I barely knew. I spoke softly, like I was confessing a crime. He listened, then said, calmly, "Take your time. Document everything." So I did. Screenshots. Bank statements. Message timestamps. Patterns that told a story better than anger ever could. At home, she grew careless. She laughed more. Stayed out later. Started talking about future plans like vacations and upgrades, assuming I'd keep funding the dream. "Once this debt is gone," she said one night, "we'll finally live a little." I nodded, the words tasting bitter. I kept paying the debts, not for her, but for the paper trail. Every payment proved who carried the weight. Every transfer tied the house, the bills, the stability to me. It felt surreal, playing the role of the devoted husband while quietly stepping away emotionally. The anger I expected never came. Instead, there was numb focus. She mistook my silence for compliance. For trust. One evening, she smiled at me across the table and said, "I'm really lucky to have you." I almost laughed. Almost. At night, lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling and repeated one thought: don't rush. Don't warn her. Revenge wasn't loud. It was patient. I stopped imagining confrontations. Stopped rehearsing speeches. This wasn't about proving she was wrong. It was about protecting what was left of me. About leaving with facts instead of scars. She thought nothing had changed. But every day, I was moving pieces into place, quietly. And with every step, I felt myself pulling further away, preparing for a moment she would never see coming. Living with the truth without letting it show nearly broke me. On the surface, nothing had changed. We still shared meals. Still talked about schedules and bills. Still slept in the same bed. But every interaction felt like acting in a play I never auditioned for. I'd watch her talk, laugh, complain about her day, and all I could think was how easily she switched between versions of herself. The wife. The victim. The liar. Nights were the worst. I'd lie there listening to her breathe, the room dark except for the glow of her phone when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes she'd smile at the screen. Sometimes she'd turn away from me, fingers moving quickly. Each time felt like a small cut I wasn't allowed to react to. I started questioning everything about myself. How did I miss this? Was I really that replaceable? I'd worked myself into the ground believing I was building something meaningful, only to realize I was just convenient. The dependable background character funding someone else's excitement. That thought hollowed me out. One night, I nearly cracked. She came home late, smelling like a different cologne mixed with her perfume. I asked, "Long day?" My voice sounded normal, but my chest was pounding. She nodded casually. "Yeah. Exhausting." Then she kissed my cheek and walked past me like nothing was wrong. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the wall, hands gripping the counter so hard my knuckles hurt. I wanted to scream. To throw everything I knew onto the table and force her to look at it. To make her explain why I wasn't enough. Instead, I went into the bathroom and sat on the floor, back against the tub, lights off. For the first time in my life, I cried silently, not out of sadness, but humiliation. I felt stupid for every shift, every sacrifice, every time I defended her to myself. That was my lowest point. Not discovering the affair, but realizing how small I'd allowed myself to become to keep someone who didn't respect me. When I finally stood up, wiped my face, and looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the man staring back. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't live like this much longer. Once I hit that low point, something inside me hardened, not into anger, but resolve. I stopped thinking in terms of why she did it and started focusing on how I would leave intact. Emotion had already taken enough from me. I wasn't going to let it take my future too. Every move after that was deliberate. During lunch breaks, I sat in my car with the windows cracked, forwarding documents to a private email. Deeds. Mortgage statements. Proof of payments. I learned how silence could be loud if you used it correctly. My lawyer's voice echoed in my head, "Consistency matters. Don't change your behavior yet." So I didn't. At home, she talked about plans like they were guarantees. Renovations. A trip once things settled down. She even joked one night, twirling pasta on her fork, "Imagine where we'd be without all this debt." I smiled thinly and said nothing, my heart thudding as I realized she truly believed I'd always be there to catch her. The house became symbolic in ways I hadn't expected. Every wall, every repair, every payment had my fingerprints on it. I remembered fixing the sink after a night shift, repainting the bedroom on my only day off, telling myself these sacrifices meant permanence. Now, it felt like evidence. I moved my most important things quietly. A few clothes at a time. Documents. Items that mattered but wouldn't be missed. I learned how to pack a life into small, forgettable moments. The air in the house felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. She never noticed. That was the strangest part. I was preparing to disappear, and she was comfortable enough to be careless. Comfortable enough to keep lying. Comfortable enough to assume my silence meant trust. One night, standing alone in the living room, I looked around and felt a strange calm. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a stage I was about to walk off. I wasn't angry. I wasn't loud. I wasn't dramatic. I was ready. And she had no idea how close everything was to falling apart. The day I filed didn't feel dramatic. There was no shouting, no tears, no final argument. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and quiet, the kind of day that feels forgettable until it isn't. I woke up before my alarm, lay there listening to her breathe, and felt nothing. Not love. Not anger. Just distance. I went to work like usual. Same clothes. Same coffee. Same nods from coworkers who had no idea my life was about to split in two. On my lunch break, I drove to the courthouse instead of my car like I'd done so many times before. My hands didn't shake this time. That scared me more than fear would have. The papers were already prepared. Clean. Organized. Every payment documented. Every timeline clear. When I signed my name, it felt unreal, like I was authorizing someone else's life. The clerk slid the documents back and said, "You're all set." Just like that. I sat in my car afterward, engine off, staring through the windshield. I expected relief. Or triumph. Or even grief. What I felt instead was quiet. Heavy, but calm. Like I'd finally set something down after carrying it for too long. She was served later that afternoon. I wasn't there when it happened, but I know the moment because my phone exploded with messages. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts stacked on top of each other. What is this? Is this a mistake? Why wouldn't you talk to me first? When I finally answered, her voice was sharp and confused. What did you do? She demanded. I filed, I said. 2 words. Steady. She started crying, then yelling, then crying again. After everything I'm going through? After all I trusted you with? I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just listened. The narrative she'd relied on was collapsing, and she didn't know how to stand without it. When she brought up the house, our house, I told her calmly that my lawyer would explain. That's when her tone changed. And for the first time, I heard fear in her voice. Real fear. I ended the call without another word, knowing the next conversation would be very different. The fallout didn't explode the way I thought it would. It unraveled slowly, awkwardly, like a lie finally running out of room to breathe. Word spread, but not because I told it. The documents did that for me. Timelines don't argue. Numbers don't shout. They just sit there, undeniable. Friends started calling, not to ask what happened, but to say, "I didn't know," or, "I'm sorry, man." A few admitted they'd sensed something was off but never imagined this. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't add details. The truth felt heavy enough without me pressing it down harder. She, on the other hand, was frantic. Her messages shifted tone daily. One moment she was angry, accusing me of betrayal, coldness, abandonment. The next, she was pleading. "We can fix this," she said in a voice I barely recognized. "Everyone makes mistakes." She talked like the affair was a footnote, not the foundation of everything she'd taken. Then came the panic about money. The debts followed her once the accounts were separated. Minimums she couldn't cover. Calls she couldn't avoid. She asked if I could help just a little, like nothing had changed. When I said no, calmly, once, she went quiet. That silence told me everything. Packing my things was strangely easy. I took only what mattered. The house felt empty even with furniture still inside it. Every room echoed with memories that no longer belonged to me. I walked through it one last time, not angry, not nostalgic, just aware that this chapter was closed. When I left the keys on the counter, my hands finally shook. Not from regret. From release. That night, alone in a small temporary place, I sat on the floor and listened to the quiet. No buzzing phone. No tension in the air. No pretending. For the first time in years, my thoughts were my own. But I knew it wasn't over yet. The legal side was moving forward, and she was starting to understand what she was actually losing. And when that realization fully hit her, I had a feeling she wasn't going to take it quietly. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was unfamiliar. I didn't know what to do with it at first. For years, my life had been structured around urgency, bills due, shifts to cover, problems to solve. Without that constant pressure, my days felt strangely unanchored, like I'd stepped off a moving treadmill and my body still expected it to be there. I started small. Sleeping through the night. Eating real meals. Letting my phone stay silent without panicking. The exhaustion didn't disappear right away, it lingered in my bones, but for the first time, it wasn't being replenished daily. I wasn't paying for someone else's chaos anymore. Therapy came next. I didn't go to talk about her. I went to understand myself. Why I equated love with endurance. Why I mistook being needed for being valued. Sitting in that quiet office, I admitted things I'd never said out loud, that I was afraid of being disposable, that I believed my worth came from how much I could carry without breaking. Some days, the grief hit me out of nowhere. Not for the marriage, but for the version of myself I'd lost along the way. The guy who laughed more. Who rested without guilt. Who didn't apologize for existing. Other days, I felt something close to pride. I'd survived something that could have hollowed me out completely, and I didn't let it. She tried reaching out again during this time. Longer messages. Softer words. Apologies that arrived too late to matter. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I just wasn't available. The house was officially mine now. On paper, it was a win. In reality, it felt like a symbol, proof that sacrifice, when documented and owned, couldn't be erased or rewritten. Standing alone in one of the empty rooms one evening, I realized something that stopped me cold. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And I was finally close enough to it to protect it, no matter what came next. I didn't walk away dramatically. There was no final confrontation, no speech where I laid everything out and watched it land. My exit was quiet, intentional, and permanent, and that turned out to be the most powerful part. Living alone again felt strange at first. The house was quiet in a different way now, not tense or watchful, just still. Mornings didn't start with anxiety anymore. I'd wake up, sunlight spilling through the windows, and realize I didn't owe anyone my exhaustion. No one was waiting to take more from me. She tried one last time to reach me through mutual contacts. I heard she was angry. Then embarrassed. Then furious again. The story kept changing, but the ending didn't. I never corrected the narrative. I didn't need to. People saw the facts on their own. And more importantly, I saw them clearly. The house stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like an asset, something solid I'd earned, not a monument to pain. I repainted the walls. Rearranged the furniture. Removed anything that reminded me of who I used to be in that marriage. Every change felt like reclaiming ground I'd once surrendered quietly. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't then. Love isn't proven by how much you can endure. It's proven by mutual care, honesty, and respect. Anything else is just debt with a nicer name. I don't hate her. I don't forgive her either. She's simply someone who taught me the cost of ignoring my own limits. And I paid that cost once, never again. People sometimes ask if I regret not confronting her, not demanding answers, not watching her admit what she did. The truth is, I didn't need that closure. Filing quietly, taking what I'd built, and walking away intact was my answer. I didn't lose a marriage. I escaped a lie. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not carrying anyone but myself, and that weight feels lighter than anything I've ever held.